All right, today marks the 1 year anniversary of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. At this time last year, many Americans had not even heard of Volodymyr Zelensky, but we've all watched his leadership. We've all watched his resolve and the resolve of the Ukrainian people over the past year, and unquestionably, many have been inspired as we have watched on.
And Ukraine is facing this war not alone. We have friends. We make sure this aggression, this war would not continue anywhere else. It's important for everyone to focus, to stay working in their own places, and that's it. And then we'll have victory.
That was from President Zelensky himself in a press briefing that he held just a few hours ago. So where is the battle going to go from here? Joining me now live from Ukraine is freelance writer correspondent Chuck Holton. Chuck, welcome to Washington Watch. We appreciate you coming on.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, listen, it was about this time a year ago that you actually were on this program with Tony right before the invasion actually got started. In fact, I wanted to begin by playing a clip from that interview of you and Tony a year ago.
The people here in Kiev really still, I think, don't believe that he's going to try to take the whole country. And so if he does, it's going to be mayhem. It's going to be really bad.
Wow, right you were. Here we are 365 days later. As you, Chuck, reflect back on that day and what's happened in the past years, give me your thoughts.
Well, when I was sitting not far from where I'm sitting right now, a year ago, the city was eerily quiet. It had all but emptied out very, very quickly. We were sort of baffled in the run-up to the invasion at the nonchalance that we saw in the Ukrainian people. And what I took for sort of a lack of preparedness, what I've since found was just that they had already been fighting this war for 8 years before it started a year ago. And so they were inured to it already. They knew what it was like to be in a nation at war. And this is a war unlike any other war that I have covered because it's a conventional war as opposed to an insurgency like we had in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places. And so there are actual front lines that change from day to day. But if you're not near those front lines, it's sometimes hard to remember that there's a war going on. If you look right outside my window, it's after curfew right now here, it's midnight, but if you look out here during the daytime, there are people walking their dogs and licking ice cream and going about their business, shopping. And you would almost just think you're in any capital in Europe. But if you look a little closer, you'll see the sandbags around the monuments, and you'll see sandbags built up in the windows of some office buildings around here. And you'll see some windows that are boarded up still. Now, Kyiv is no longer empty, because the people, once they realized that Russia was not going to be able to take Kyiv, the people came back. And now there are more people living here than there were before the war because we have all the refugees from out east that have come here. So Russia it started out with an idea that it was going to take the whole country. And it thought that would be very easy, but they didn't count on the fact that Ukraine would fight back. And so when they did fight back, and they fought back strongly, Russia was unable. Their advance broke down very quickly, just within a matter of weeks. And so then they had to pull back and sort of refocus their combat power in the east to try to just solidify the Luhansk and Donetsk region, the Donbas area down there, and try to shore that up and take the rest of the parts of those oblasts that they didn't already own. That actually failed as the Ukrainians hit the Russians with a big counterattack in September that pushed them out of the northern part of the Donbass and pushed them out of Kherson in the south. So Russia has lost pretty much across the board. Ukraine has more tanks now than they had before the war. Many of those tanks were Russian tanks that were either abandoned or captured by the Ukrainians. They call it the Russian Lend-Lease program. They have the Russians, when they realized they weren't going to succeed at their mission in the Donbass, decided that they were going to take out the infrastructure here in Ukraine and pound away at the power grid, and they were able to degrade it by about 50%. When I was here in December, we had 4 or 5 hours a day rolling blackouts, and now, if you look out the window, the lights are all on. We haven't had a blackout here in about 2 weeks, and that just shows that the Ukrainians have been adapting to this new reality and pushing the Russians very hard. The thing that we didn't count on was just the fact that the Russians have such an appetite for losing. They have such an appetite for putting their men into the meat grinder.
And Chuck, let me ask you this. We've only got a few minutes left here. I was actually in some briefings with this while I was in Congress. I was there when we had an address from President Zelensky himself, and it really has been inspiring, the resolve of him and the Ukrainian people. But behind the scenes in all of that is a church, a vibrant church in Ukraine. You, as a Christian, you've spoken about your reactions and your interactions to the involvement of the church in Ukraine. Tell us real quickly about that.
There are a ton. As a matter of fact, the president was giving medals to the chaplains today.
I saw that.
That have been out with the Army, and I've met so many vibrant Christians here. I'll just tell you about one real quickly. One family in a town called Okachiv that was down, or Orihiv, down in the south of Zaporizhia, only about 2 kilometers from the Russian lines, in a little town that had been 20,000 people, was down to 2,000. And the only reason there were anybody left is because they just simply couldn't leave. They didn't have any money. They didn't have anywhere to go. And there was one Christian family there, a pastor and his family, who said that their church grew from about 40 people before the war to over 100 now that 90% of the people had left their town. And they prayed about it. They have the means to leave if they need to. They have vehicles and money, but they prayed about it, and they feel like God told them that he would be glorified one way or the other in that circumstance. He could be glorified through them, or he could be glorified through someone else. And so they decided to stay. And there, when the bombs start falling, I spent the night with them, and there were just bombs falling all around. And when they start falling, that family gets together around the kitchen table and holds hands and prays. And they have so far continued to help the people and bring in aid to the people that are still there. It's an amazing story.
It is amazing. We've only got a little over a minute left here. One of the reports that I'm hearing is Russia is bleeding out equipment, and that eventually this could be a war won because they lack the munitions. Are you hearing anything about that real quickly? And then I want to know, how can we pray for the church and the people of Ukraine?
Yeah, without a doubt, Russia is they've got 97% of their military engaged in Ukraine, according to intelligence sources. They're using museum pieces as tanks now. They've had to pull a bunch of rusty tanks out of storage, and they've called up conscripts. So this new wave of conscripts is even less motivated, even more poorly trained, poorly equipped than the last group was. And so now the Ukrainians are much better equipped, much better trained. And so they I don't expect this new push to do any better than the last one. How can we pray? I've been praying that God would thwart the plans of evil men, because Russia has a huge appetite for this, meat grinder and just pushing men in there. And they feel like they can outlast the West, and that's how they will win.
Chuck Holton, I know it's late there, about midnight. Thank you so much for staying up and joining us this evening on Washington Watch. We deeply appreciate it.
I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for having me on. You guys are doing good work getting the word out.